morning, everyone. Firstly, I must apologize for the delay. It's technology, and I think we love to hate it at times. But thank you all. Thank you all for making the time. So my name is Farah. As the chair of the Durban branch, I'd like to welcome everyone to this Women's Leadership Masterclass session. This being the second in our series, Doing It a Woman's Way. Okay, so to our honored guests, Prof and Dr. Singh, it's a privilege to host you ladies today.
Thank you, Farah, and thank you to the BMF for the opportunity.
Okay, so I've enabled everything and we are good to go. Dr. Singh, thank you so much. Thank you so much as well. I really want to thank you ladies for sharing some of your knowledge, your experience, and some of the tips, the guidance that you're gonna leave with us today, just to help us ladies along our professional journeys as well. So in this masterclass, we are going to unpack technology, okay, but in particular, we are going to unpack the online environment, okay, the gender digital divide, and how do us as women, how do we try to overcome this? And I think what this pandemic actually has done, what this pandemic has actually also done is it's highlighted and it's brought to the fore many divides that exist. And one such divide is the gender digital divide. And while this may be a global concern, it is really more pronounced on the African continent. So technology and the internet is a great enabler for young girls and for women. But because of the lack of opportunities, skills, and training, many don't make use of the tools, and they don't create the digital tools and online content. And with us right now, with social distancing and government enforced lockdowns, it's only through the digital technology that we have actually been able to stay in contact with each other, with the continuation of work and education. But over 90% of the jobs worldwide are now already have a digital component, okay? So, and most jobs in the future are going to require a digital skill that's a lot more advanced than it is now. How will our young ladies and how will our women be able to compete in industries where already so much is gone digital, okay, if they do not have the skills that is required? So today we are very lucky to have an expert in Dr. Singh, who will help us better understand the space. So I want to appeal to everybody, all the ladies that are online at the moment. Please ask as many questions as you like, and I think we are all constantly playing catch up in this space. So I don't think that there are any questions that are stupid, because we sometimes feel that the questions are stupid questions, but I think in the space of technology, we are constantly playing catch up. So I would like to introduce Dr. Singh to you. So Dr. Upasana Singh is a senior lecturer in the discipline of Information Systems and Technology at UKZN's Westville campus. She has a keen interest in educational technologies, and in 2019, she completed her fellowship in teaching advancement in universities. Her primary area of research is digital teaching and learning in higher education. During the pandemic, she has developed 3 conceptual models emerging from her research of the transition to online learning for academic students and females. Dr. Singh, welcome.
Good morning, Farah. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me here. Thank you, Farah, for the invitation. Thank you to Prof. Cecile for inviting me and for facilitating this. And good morning to all the lovely ladies. I know it's difficult to find time off on a Saturday morning to spare, especially with all the family commitments. So for those of you that have joined us, welcome to today's session. So as Farah has explained, we're going to be starting off with a little bit of background into some terminology associated with the use of technology. And in particular, I want to focus on two aspects, the first being the digital divide, and the second moving on to the gender digital divide. I was hoping to have a little more interaction than we currently have on the webinar, but let's try and work with what we have. So I'm going to invite you, if you have access to your computer, if you're watching this on a computer, if not, if you have access to a mobile phone, I'm going to invite you to log on to the website called slido.com. Okay, so the instructions, let me just share my screen. Okay, so the instructions to for this particular activity is to get to the website slido.com and use the hashtag for the event, which is BMF. And I want you just to introduce yourself by typing out who you are, where you work, or what your designation is, and one unique aspect of your personality. We just like to get to know who is in this room and where you are in terms of the use of technology in your professional working environments. So I'm going to repeat the instructions. You can log on to the site slido.com. You would type out slido.com in your web browser. For those of you that are using mobile phones, and if you have a scanner app, you're welcome to scan the QR code at the top of the screen. Once you're there, it's going to ask you for an event code, and the event code that you're using is hashtag BMF, all in small letters. And then you can type out your response. As you type out your response and hit the enter key, I should see it coming live on my screen here. The idea here is that we're trying to get to know each other in a distance-based environment where we're all in different places in South Africa currently, and we have limited interaction or interactive abilities in the way in which the Zoom webinar has been set up. So we're trying to use an alternative platform to get to know each other. Okay, if anybody is having any difficulties in this process, please let us know on the chat facility. Okay, so I'm waiting for responses. Thank you, Farah. I'm sure with your bubbly personality, you are definitely a people's person. Hi, Kasturi. If I remember correctly, Kasturi, we were in school together. If this is the same Kasturi. Hi, Kasturi. It's good to have a familiar name in the audience. Hi, Lebo. So you're a consultant. Good to hear. Okay, so we have 14 people in the room and we have 3 responses. Can I invite a few more ladies to participate and let us know who you are? The instructions again are slido.com in your web browser. Hashtag BMF is the code. and introduce yourself by typing out your response on the screen. Okay, I'm going to give it another 20 seconds, then we need to move on. Okay, we'll move on to content then. Okay, so the topic of today's session is professionalizing your online experience, and I'm going to be spending a bit of time in the second half of the session going through some tips on how to professionalize your online experience. The first half of the session is going to be focusing on some concepts associated with what we call the digital divide. So I want to invite you again to go back to the Slido interface, and this time I'm going to be sharing a poll with you, and I hope that we get a little more interaction with the poll. You should see a quiz on your page currently, and the first question for the quiz is available. You have 20 seconds or approximately 20 seconds left in which to complete it. And I want you to help me to define what the digital divide means. Does it encompass inequality? Does it encompass access to the internet? Does it encompass access to devices or technology? Or have you never heard of the term digital divide previously? Okay, thus far we've had one response. There's another 5 seconds left. Okay, so to validate the response that we've received, let us look now at what the definition is of the digital divide. So the digital divide essentially refers to the inequality between people's access to technology and people's access to the internet or network or data connectivity. When we talk about inequality, this inequality can be in terms of inequality, in terms of race, in terms of income, in terms of age. It could also be regional inequality depending on which geographical area you're in. And essentially what we're looking at is this difference between the access to the internet and access to technology across different race groups, across different income groups, and across different race groups. So the technology that we speak about can include technology like the television, the telephone, personal computers, laptops, mobile phones, and of course the actual network connectivity, that is the internet or mobile data. In education specifically, it describes the inequalities in physical access to technology, resources, and skills that empower a person to become a digital citizen. And the concept of a digital citizen is somebody who knows how to behave in an online environment in a professional manner. And the concept and the terminology behind digital citizens and how you become a good digital citizen is probably an entire masterclass on its own. But essentially what we're saying here is that you need to understand the impact of your digital footprint in the online environment. So according to Mossberger, he refers to a digital citizen as somebody who uses or utilizes information technology in order to engage in society, to engage in politics, to engage in government participation. And so by engaging in these three spheres of our lives, we are then able to interact in a more professional manner using technology. So why does the digital divide actually exist? Now, probably the most recent report during the COVID-19 pandemic, which looked at the concept of the digital divide in terms of the global pandemic, was the Capgemini Research Institute project. And in that project, the report that they generated looked at age, income, and experience in terms of the digital divide. And their results showed that nearly 40% of people that live in lower incomes or in poverty have never used the internet. So the first factor in terms of the digital divide is the cost factor. The second is the age group factor. And interestingly enough, they found in their report that the age groups of between 18 to 36 were the highest proportion that were not online. In other words, the younger generation were those that experienced a greater digital divide than the older generation. In addition to that, the third factor that accounted for digital divide was the complexity of using the internet. So those participants that felt that the internet was too complex to use did not make use of it. And then people who had a perceived lack of interest stemming from fear of the use of the internet were those that were mostly offline. And then, of course, came COVID-19. And during COVID-19, we saw the world shift to digital. Everything moved to an online environment, whether we're talking about shopping, whether we're talking about ordering food from restaurants, whether we're looking at education. Every aspect of our lives has been touched by some form of technology. And that was a result of COVID-19, which propelled the use of digital devices during the pandemic. And I think that this propelled use of technology and digital devices is here to stay for a while. So have we ever tried to imagine what the lockdown would have been like if we did not have contact with each other through social media? Besides just helping us to keep in contact socially with our friends and family, social media had a great role to play in terms of keeping us up to date with what is happening with the pandemic. Okay, barring the fake news that went around that created more worry and anxiety and stress in us. The social media also had the positive consequences where we looked at being able to communicate with our friends and family who we couldn't visit, we couldn't see, who we couldn't get to. We could communicate and collaborate with colleagues. So I have found personally that my own collaboration in terms of the work that I do, research work that I do, has increased during the COVID-19 because there was a digital space in which we could work together. Okay, the use of video calling, the concept of virtual meetings like we're having now, and then of course online classes in the education sector. We also found that during the lockdown, urban areas where access to the internet, access to broadband, access to data were facilitating factors in people making use of social media and other forms of technology. However, another report which was conducted by Google Insight and Adecco revealed that we in the African countries and other Asian countries are some of the lowest usage of artificial intelligence and fast broadband, which means that we experience a greater digital divide because people have less access to good and stable internet connectivity. So UNESCO did a report in 2019 that was pre-COVID-19, and in their digital economy report, they issued a warning in there that the digital divide will worsen inequalities if there isn't a global collaborative effort to reduce this digital divide. And then when COVID-19 came in, the pandemic just exposed and widened this chasm between those that were connected or those who were connected and those who were not connected. And this just revealed how far behind many of these countries are in terms of the digital uptake. And I think we can see it for ourselves in our own country, where there has been great discrepancies between people who have had access and people who haven't had access. And coming from the education sector, for example, our learners at school and our students at universities, how many of them have been able to continue with their studies, how many of them have dropped out, and how many of them have been left behind is all dependent on the access that they've had to technology and to the internet itself. So stemming from this was a report that I found really interesting, which was conducted by Sayama in May 2020. And Sayama looked at social media usage across the African countries. And from the graph here, or from the diagram here, we can see Egypt as the leading social media users, having the largest amount of social media users in Africa. Then we have Algeria, Nigeria, and South Africa not far behind at number 4 with 20 million social media users. Sayama's report then went into detail in terms of the gender digital divide, which is the next concept that I'm coming to. And the gender digital divide essentially is looking at the same digital divide that we have just introduced, but how does it affect the female population? And if we just look at Sayama's report here, you can see the trend line in terms of usage of social media. She looked at 5 different social media networks. And here you can see that the only one that has been used greatly above the average usage is Snapchat by females. And then in the bottom graph, you can see the contribution to the total population of Africa's top 10 countries by active Facebook users. And as we can see here, on average, females do not make more than 50% use of Facebook. And we're going to come to some reasons for that in the next few slides. So Farah, before I move on to gender digital divide, is there anything that you would like to interact with at this point in time?
No, can we open this session up for questions, Dr. Singh?
Sure, no problem.
Yeah, because
I'm have some interaction if
yes,
possible.
I have one though, and
Yes.
On your slide that she said, why does the digital divide exist? What is the reason for the age 18 to 35 not taking up the digital space? Is it a cost? Is it no access to the devices? Is it training? Is it the fear? What did the research?
Okay. According to that research, all he said in that particular study was that the participants who participated in that study came from the lower income group areas. So those that came from the lower income group areas did not have access to devices, and they did not have access to large amounts of data. So devices that they could use, and they had limited amounts of data. So therefore, the younger age group was merely a cost factor. And then secondly, some of them had more responsibilities that they needed to take on at home. So they wouldn't invest that much in digital devices and data access because they would rather use that money for food in the house or to support their families. So I'm sure that it would be different in different countries, but this was an overall when he looked at, and probably his sample looked more at the developing countries than the developed countries. So I'm sure it would be different in developed countries if we had to look at it.
Thanks, Doc. Thank you.
Okay, so do we want to still open it up? Are there any queries from any participants?
Yeah. Ladies, please go ahead and ask any questions if you have any thus far. Okay. I think you can
All right.
continue, Doc.
Okay. While we waiting, sorry. Okay. So while we're waiting, the next question that I have up on the screen is, in particular, females often have less access to technology and the internet due to which of the following possible reasons? Okay, so if anybody would like to participate in the quiz, and I would urge you to participate so that we can try to get some interaction. You have, I'll leave it open for 30 seconds. Okay, so some of the reasons that we have is the struggle to afford technology, existing stereotypes around technology being for males, the fear of being discriminated against, the lack of education. Which of these, or which of them do you feel resonates the most with the gender digital divide? Okay, thus far we have 3 responses. Keep going, ladies. Another 10 seconds. 4, good, doing better than the first round. Okay, for those of you that don't know how to connect, it's slido.com on the internet browser, and the hashtag for the event is BMF. Okay, last 5 seconds. Okay, let us look at the results for that particular quiz question. Okay, and we can see here that from the 5 responses that we received from the attendees, majority of them feel that the main barrier for females is the cost factor, the stereotype, and the lack of education. Okay, so let's get back to what we have found then from the research and what other people in the area of gender digital divide have to say. And here we have the concept of the gender digital divide being the largest in the least developed countries. So in the countries that are less developed, the gender digital divide is greater. We also note that the internet gap is the largest in Africa, sadly, and in South Asia, the largest mobile ownership gap is present. So if we're looking at the access to the internet, the largest gap in the access to the internet is in Africa, and the largest gap in the access to mobile devices is in South Asia. According to the 2019 UNESCO report, which looked at girls studying STEM-based careers, they found that only 35% of STEM students in higher education globally are women. It was also noted that only 3% of female students in higher education choose ICT. And this, for me, is a rather sad statistic, being in the IT sector myself. I realized that we need to educate our younger generation of females about the possibilities in IT and take away those stereotypes that they have associated with technology being or engineering being only for males. In South Africa, just some statistics, women make up 5% of CEOs in ICT companies, and of course these are 2017 statistics, so they may have increased in the last 3 years. 22% of computer science graduates are women. Only 2% or close on to 3% of females receive jobs in the field of technology. And the Engineering Council of South Africa, which is the major body for engineers in South Africa, in 2018 said that they had only 11% of engineers that were registered with them as females. Okay, so I have a little video clip here which shows us or highlights to us what the younger generation in Africa feel about girls in technology and why they want girls to participate in technological-based careers and to study technology-based degrees. Okay, so just give me a minute to start the video.
Technology gives us opportunities to express ourselves.
I think girls should engage in technology because it's something good, something that can add.
Okay, so the digital divide is real. As you can see, I'm ducking to get the video playing today.
Dr. Singh?
Yes, the digital divide is reality. I lost connectivity there, so please excuse me. I am now back. I'm going to try the video one more time. Okay, I think let us just skip the video. And move on. Okay, sorry, please bear. Okay, so why is the digital divide really an issue? Why do we need to make a fuss about gender digital divide? And the first is, you would have seen this illustrated very clearly in the video if it had played, is that if females do not have access to technology, they do not have access to the internet, females cannot participate equally in digital society. So neither can they participate in the discussions that are going on regarding current topics. It affects their ability to speak out on issues that relate to them and issues that affect them. They also become less involved in creating digital tools and online content. And overall, it negatively impacts on the economy and the potential for growth in that particular country. So what are the ways in which we can then try to reduce this gender digital divide? And I would have liked to open this up in terms of a discussion with the audience, but in the interest of time, let's just see what are some of the ways in which we can try to reduce this gender digital divide. So one of the ways in which we can do this is to make sure that we start focusing on the younger females that are going into school and perhaps create an awareness for them of the environment that is available for them to study in terms of technology-based careers. So education is one of the key cornerstones to reducing the gender-digital divide. The other is that technology should become an enabler for girls to participate in using technology rather than becoming a barrier and leaving them further behind. Thirdly, we need to find a balance in terms of where females can participate with less discrimination and taking away that stereotype. They must also feel free to participate in an online environment without facing any harassment, without facing any judgment, without facing any discrimination for speaking out in terms of issues that affect them. And then digital literacy. Digital literacy is the key and the cornerstone to making sure that people become digitally competent. So training them on how to use different forms of technology starts at the school level, and therefore it's necessary for girls to be encouraged to go to school and to complete their schooling rather than leaving their schooling and going back into their rural areas just to run a household. Okay, the other ways in which we can try to reduce this digital divide is to have more programs that invest in digital skills training. And then governments and enterprises need to get together and work hand in hand to help to reduce this digital divide by promoting females in leadership positions and giving them giving them a chance to take on leadership roles. So just an example of one initiative that happened here in South Africa in 2019, where Vodacom had a group of school learners who came during one of the school breaks. It was during the winter vacation, and they trained them on how to create their own website. So these 500 female learners were then given training on how to create their own website and become digitally literate in website creation. So this is one initiative that stood out in terms of narrowing the gender digital divide at an early age in South Africa. So stemming from my interest in this whole concept of the gender digital divide, I have put together this conceptual framework of what I think is necessary for us to invest in order to reduce the gender digital divide in South Africa. The starting point is the infrastructure and technology. So we need to have good bandwidth, and I believe right now you're not facing good bandwidth with me currently. And we need to have access to technology. So the technology needs to be made available to females in order for them to participate. Then we need to train the younger generation on how to use the different forms of technology. So that is the digital literacy component. Then after we train them on how to use the digital devices, we then create for them the awareness. So what can they do with those devices? What can they do with the training we have provided them with? Can they become independent in terms of running their own businesses online? Can they reach out to a bigger audience if they're campaigning? How do they make use of this technology in a safe and secure way? And lastly, and most importantly, and I found in terms of research that this has been very effective in the developing countries where communities of practice have been set up. So for example, in rural areas where there's less access to technology and less access to the internet, NGOs and government organizations have joined and partnered to go out into these rural areas, issue say 20 technological devices to mentors in those areas, train them on the use of those devices, and they would then train other females in their areas. And so they build up this community of practice. And then they share with each other what they have done and what has worked successfully and what hasn't worked successfully. So to me, the key element of reducing the gender digital divide is the communities of practice where we learn from each other. So this is just a conceptual framework, has not yet been tested. It's still in the process of being tested. But I would like to open it up to all of you that are here today to let me know what other aspects you think could contribute to reducing this gender digital divide. And at that point, Farah, I think it's necessary in an online environment that we take a break, give the participants a chance either to go and grab a cup of coffee, or if they want to engage with us in an informal environment, I will be here. Thanks, Farah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Singh. I see there are two, you want to have a look at two, a question and a comment, but as Mapule's comment, we can also chat about. So Labo Nkuku says, how do we bridge the divide when more and more people are losing jobs and getting poorer?
Yes, Labo, that is a concern. The economy is not in a state in which we can support each other very much financially. But I would like to say that reducing the digital divide is more than just giving people devices and giving people access to technology. It's about creating the awareness. It's about educating people. So the initiative, for example, here that has been taken by the Black Management Forum is one example of the way in which we can reduce the digital divide. So in the next part of the session, I'm going to be sharing with you some of the tips that I feel are useful when you are in an online environment to professionalize your contact with other people. And so by educating others on how to use the technology, when to use it, what your digital footprint is about, how do you manage your digital footprint, and by building up these communities of practice, maybe infrastructurally, we will not be able to reduce the digital divide, but we will be able to share with each other from our own experiences in terms of using the technology. So the other way is also for companies, NGOs, government organizations that do have funding available. They also need to play their role in terms of providing the infrastructure, providing the technology, so that those that are less fortunate start getting access to technology and to the internet. I'm not sure if you want to come in, or Prof. Proches wants to come in. You're welcome to come in at any point.
I just want to add on to that, and for the ladies that didn't attend our first in the series of masterclass sessions specifically for us ladies, this is what we actually wanted. We wanted to create this community of through these workshops of women who can support each other. We can learn from each other. It becomes a safe space for us to make the mistakes if we're going to make the mistakes, but know that we've got a Prof. Herval, a Dr. Singh, another lady that's on the group where we share best practices. So we don't have to continue making the mistakes, you know, the generational mistakes and all of that don't need to happen. So that was just to add on to what you were saying, Dr. Singh, that is also the reason that we wanted to have these sessions specifically for women, is so that we can deal with these things because they are real and they exist for us every day. So just for the ladies that weren't on our first session, and ladies, please also look out for our sessions coming up later in the month. Prof. Herval, can we bring you in? Would you like to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Farah and Dr. Singh. I think what I'll do is when Dr. Singh has finished her presentation, I'll just like to briefly bring back what we're talking about today, back to the organizational context and management and leadership, if that's fine with you. So I'll just come in at the end, 10 minutes, and just all tie it all together.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Singh.
Okay. So Dr. Singh, we've got Mapule, who says access to reliable internet is also a factor to digital divide. There's no fiber in townships.
So Mapule, that is a very interesting question. I do not have access to fiber in the urban area in which I live, but I get your point. It's not just fiber. There isn't access to data connectivity essentially in rural townships. And we have seen this being exposed to us in a greater extent with this COVID-19 pandemic, where we've had to interact with students in the online environment. And that has been one of the greatest challenges. So right now, we don't have solutions for that, but I would like to encourage younger females, the younger generation, to do some research in this area. So at a recent IT conference that we held here in South Africa, there were a number of papers that were presenting in terms of alternate electricity access, alternate data access, and looking at ways in which we can get data and electricity to the rural areas, because one of the basic components of infrastructure is the electricity. Right now, we have load shedding that we go through in South Africa. We have areas that don't have consistent access to electricity. So by getting our younger generation involved in this research and designing, perhaps getting competitions and getting them involved in designing these new forms of electricity generation access to the internet, I'm sure that within a few years, we could try to reduce that problem of data access. So one of the countries overseas, the example that I read, they created what was known as data poles. And these data poles were then installed in village areas or in rural areas, and people were then able to connect to the internet for certain hours in the day. There was a window period when those poles were activated with the use of data. Then we have also seen, for example, I think it was in the Johannesburg area during the lockdown when schools started teaching their students online, and some of the learners did not have access to the internet. Schools started making use of their rugby fields or their sports facilities. So open areas in which hotspots were created, and because of the social distancing, students were allowed to come into those rugby fields with their parents, sit in the car, but still have access to the internet through the hotspot in order to complete their studies. So it's thinking about innovative ways in which we can grant each other access through the most cost-effective means. And it doesn't mean that you need to have constant access, but enough access to complete the activity that you want to complete. So just innovative ideas that we need to think about in terms of access for rural areas.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. There's Labo has a comment on your framework. So
Yes.
she says, I like this proposed framework. I would start the awareness on opportunities offered by technology before, whilst infrastructure is being constructed. Let people have the hunger for technology so they can push governments and business to act.
Yes, Labo, I think that COVID-19 has already propelled that hunger for technology in the sense that people are forced now to make use of technology. So there is a little bit of the propelling. We need to now guide them into how they can use this technology effectively for their own purposes. So yes, thank you for that comment.
So
and I think Labo has a further comment.
Sorry, just on this one, Dr. Singh, you said your framework has not, it's not been approved, or it's not?
No, it's just something that I conceptualized from my own research in this area.
Okay, so would you like comment? Would you like any of the ladies to engage with you on it?
Absolutely. So if there's anybody that would like to participate in the process of validating the framework, they're more than welcome to contact me. We could do a little case study, for example, and see how it works in your environment. So maybe you're from the law sector and somebody might be, there was a consultant in the group, somebody else might be from the engineering sector. So it might be different. There might be different facets that apply to different fields of specialization. And I would be more than happy for anybody to join me.
Okay, so I think, ladies, just on that one, if you are keen to engage with Dr. Singh, specifically on her proposed framework, and add some value and give your input, please email Bongiwe, and we will set that up with Dr. Singh as a collective. So if you are keen, please, I do encourage you. I think your input could assist a lot and will be extremely valuable to her. So thank you, Labo. Thank you, Dr. Singh, for that. So Labo has another one. Is big business doing enough to measure effectiveness of their programs? Despite CSR initiatives like Vodacom, we don't see these kids making a success after the programs or being absorbed in the job market. 100%. Dr.
True, Labo, there isn't a follow-up. That's very true. So the big businesses do it, and I think that they do it because they truly have an intent to reduce the digital divide, but there needs to be a follow-up, and maybe that's where we can play a role. Trying to equip the younger generation with the know-how to get into the job market. I'm seeing a lot during this COVID-19. The talk seems to be around the degree that the students are doing is not going to be enough. What is required by employers these days are the soft skills, and it seems to be that amongst the soft skills is the use of technology. Besides being adaptable and flexible, because we saw how everybody had to migrate to working from home, one of the big skills that students need to have today is technology. And I just want to give you an example. Our second semester started at UKZN 2 weeks ago, and our students have to use the Zoom environment. Well, one of the environments that they could use is Zoom, and that's the one that's most popularly adopted. I take a small third-year class, which has about 30 students, and I was very surprised to know that a number of students in that class, and mind you, these are supposed to be students that are majoring in IT, they are in their third year of information technology. They struggled to get on to a Zoom meeting, which is merely a click of a link. But I would get emails 5 minutes into the session to say, I can't connect to your session. I don't know how to do this. And it made me realize that we train our students, or we teach our students content that is required for them to pass the exams, but we're not actually teaching them those skills that they require to flourish in the workplace. So I've now changed my whole approach in my lectures, where I spend a few minutes with them at the beginning of every session, teaching them how to use simple technology. So how do you use the video function on Zoom? How do you change your virtual background? How do you record on the Zoom facility? How do you chat? How do you annotate? And I think that is going to be of more value to them. Not saying that the degree is not going to be worth anything, but I think that these sort of skills we need to start sharing with each other, and not on a paid basis, but as communities of practice, even with our own students.
I would have to agree with you, Dr. Singh, on the sharing. I think we're falling behind in terms of that, and that's no fault of anyone's really, because we all still playing catch up when it comes to technology. It's moving at a speed of light, and I don't think we'll ever be there where we should be. But and for us as women, I think it's a lot worse. It is a lot worse because we're constantly trying to develop ourselves, across the board. And technology is just one of those where we will be playing catch up all the time. So we have also Kasturi who has a question for you, Dr. Singh. Do you find there's a gender technology divide with female students at university as well?
Yes, Kasuri, I do find that. In fact, I find the gender divide even reaching female academics at in the university sector. For some strange reason, the divide is there. So I'll give you an example of some in the student category. So the students I find that the female students are more reluctant to tell you when they can't do something online. They would rather keep quiet and not participate than tell you that they don't know how to do it. But if you do speak to them, for example, in a social environment or offline, they would take the guidance from you on an individual basis. So there seems to be this perception that if I ask something, because I'm female, I might be marginalized or might be discriminated against. And then if we speak about the academic side, a lot of the females in academia are very willing to try new forms of technology, to look at different ways in which they can engage their students, to learn new tools and those kind of things. The intent is there, but they don't actually follow it through because they're afraid to go and find out, how do I do this? Lots of female academics don't want to use a YouTube video because they feel they can't learn from a video, they can't learn from a book. But when we had the webinar sessions or training sessions in an online environment where I was the trainer and they were participating, they seemed to work better in that type of environment. They seemed to be able to follow if you showed them, and they got some reassurance that what they were doing was correct. So for me, that's why one of the important factors in the DigiFem framework was this communities of practice, getting together small groups of females that some that know, some that don't know, and helping each other to share the ideas.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Singh. We've also got Karin, who's joining us from Eswatini. And we have a gentleman who's also joined us, Mr. Ntetwa. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. And he says, greetings to all, very informative session indeed. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And please, Mr. Ntetwa, if you have any questions, please pose them as well. Kasturi says, thank you. That was very helpful. So Labo would love to participate in that. Labo, I'm definitely going to make sure that happens. So that will definitely happen. Again, ladies, and also to the gentleman, Mr. Ntetwa, if you feel you can contribute to participating offline with Dr. Singh, please do email us. We would love to get your input there as well. Okay, Mapule, my female staff members are falling behind with their work, working remotely because there's school children attend classes every alternative week. What can they do to balance work on taking care of their children? Thank you. I think that is so relevant as we sit here on a Saturday. I think that is so relevant for all of us. Thank you for that question. Dr. Singh?
Farah, I would really like to give an opportunity to Prof. Proches to answer this, because this is something that we are jointly researching. Prof. Proches, would you like to add something to this at this point? Because it's precisely what we're doing our research on currently.
Definitely. I think this talks to the balance. And the reality is right now that we're working from home, things are not the same. And that's where change comes in as well. And as leaders, if we only focus on the task and the job that is to be done, but we neglect the people side of things, that's where the issues come on. And again, I think when I touch on leadership and management and the organizational context, I want to talk to this as well, because ultimately this is about change management. But if we ignore the people side of things, we're going to start to see problems. So I think, yeah, Dr. Singh, this is the critical one. Thank you.
Okay. Also, Farah, I would like to perhaps answer this a bit later on in the second session, because I have a sort of framework in there. And one of the aspects that we speak about in that framework is the concept of empathy. which I think is
Okay.
really important for leaders and managers and so on. So perhaps we can take a break.
Okay, I think everybody's okay to continue, but I would like you ladies please to also maybe just expand as we move on what your
Sure.
research is actually about, because I think it's very, very
Okay.
relevant to all of us on here, and I think also it's relevant to the way we work and live going forward. So
Thank you
you
for
can
that
continue with
opportunity,
your
Farah.
presentation, Dr. Singh.
Farah, can we just give everybody a 2-minute break? I think it's important that they just need to have a break in between.
No problem. If everybody is okay with that.
Okay, so we'll have a 2-minute break. We'll resume in 2 minutes. You can grab a cup of coffee, go to the bathroom, or just stretch your legs.
Yes, Dr. Singh, I think we can move on. I think everybody's ready.
Okay, so welcome back everybody to the second half of the session. There's been a lot of talk already, and I think we've spoken a lot about theoretical concepts like the digital divide and gender digital divide. What I do want to quickly move on to is the concept of professionalizing yourself in an online environment. And I don't have slides about this, but I would like to rather explain this in an interactive manner. And I don't know how much we're going to be able to cover in the next half an hour or so. But I'm going to start firstly with the Zoom platform as being one of those that is used most commonly across the board, whether it's in education, whether it's in government, whether it's in organizations or businesses. Now, most of us have been learning as we go along. So somebody sends us a Zoom link, we click on it, and we hope that we'll be able to connect to get onto the session for the day. In that kind of trial and error, we've learned things go right and things go wrong. So I would like to just share with you some of the little tips that I have found have worked when I'm in the Zoom environment. And these tips would work in any form of online environment. So whether you're using Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, there's so many, the WebEx from Cisco, Zoom, the concepts that we're speaking about are going to be exactly the same. If we have enough time, I would like to demonstrate to you the power of using online collaborative tools in Google Drive, Google Docs, and Google Sheets. I doubt we're going to get there today, but let's see how much we can cover. So before we move on to the concept of how to professionalize yourself in the online environment using Zoom, I have a few questions for you, and I would urge you to participate, please. Okay, so once again, slido.com, the event hashtag is BMF, and we're now moving on to the next set of questions. So the first question that you have here says, when you are in an online meeting, should the online meeting be the same duration as your face-to-face meetings? And I think we all know that face-to-face meetings can go on forever. I mean, you have an agenda and you have a schedule that's sent you that the meeting is going from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock, and you come to 11 o'clock and you haven't even covered the first 2 points in the meeting. So the first thing you must remember in an online environment is that it's very easy for people to phase out because of this lack of interaction. Right now, the way in which this session is set up, it's set up as a webinar, which is more restrictive in terms of the interaction. So besides the people posting on the chat and the Q&A facility, I actually don't know who's sitting on the other side of the screen, or if there is anybody that's sitting on the other side of the screen. So when you have your online meetings, try to keep them shorter and crisper. So you have 1 or 2 concepts that need to be covered in today's meeting, and adjourn and come back tomorrow and cover another 2 concepts. Or if your meeting has to be long and drawn out, like a 2-hour session like this, make sure that you give your attendees a body break in between to go to the bathroom. Remember that a lot of them are working from home. So they might need to attend to a child very quickly or to a family member very quickly during that break. So have these breaks on a regular basis built into your meeting time. Okay, the second question I have for you is, when you are in an online meeting, where should you be looking in order to keep the contact with your audience or your attendees? Should you be looking at your screen? Should you be looking at your notes that you have? Or should you be looking at the camera? Okay, and let us see what responses we have to this question. Okay, so we've had just one response. Anyway, the answer is correct. You should be looking at your camera. And I would like to demonstrate the difference for you. Just stop the sharing right now and switch my video on. So here you can see I'm looking at the screen and I'm talking. And when I look at the screen and I'm talking, for you as an attendee, you don't feel that you're having direct eye contact with me, although you can see that I'm communicating with you. Whereas now I'm looking directly at my camera on my laptop, and it should feel like I'm having direct eye contact with you as the attendee. And it's very important. I understand that you can't do this all the time because it's really odd for you as a presenter. When you are presenting and you're looking at the camera, you can't see what's going on the screen, neither can you see what's going on around you. So it's important for you to maintain that eye contact during the session by looking at your camera on a regular basis so that the attendees feel that you are communicating with them and you're not just communicating with your computer. If you have notes that you need to refer to, look at your notes. It becomes more natural. It's a more natural environment, but make sure to keep that eye contact up with your attendees during the session. Okay, and then the last question. Okay, so if you wanted to help your attendees to reduce the data usage for the online meetings, which of the following would you advise them to do? Would you advise them to use the mobile app version? Would you advise videos off? Or would you advise them to keep the interactions short? Okay, and the answer to this is that you should advise them to do all three. Okay, because you're using the mobile version of the app reduces your data substantially. So if you are participating in a meeting where you do not need to present, and if it is easier for you to use your mobile phone, or if it's accessible for you to use your mobile phone, do so. You are saving yourself a lot of data. Secondly, switching off the video, and I think everybody knew that, is that switching off your video does reduce your data consumption, and keeping your interactions as short as possible also helps to reduce your data consumption. So what I'm essentially trying to say here is that when you are interacting with people in an online environment, try to make it accessible for them. So I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but Zoom, for example, you can log into the same meeting or the same webinar on multiple devices. So right now, I am logged into this webinar using my computer because I need to present, but I'm also logged in to the webinar using my laptop. Using my mobile phone. So I just wanted to show you this. So you can see here, for example, I'm logged into the same meeting using two different devices. So if you need to have an interactive meeting where you have, you're presenting on one and you want to engage on the other device, you can have both the devices connected at one time, but of course that is going to increase your data consumption. But just for those of you that weren't aware of it, as long as the meeting has been set up in such a way that you can connect from multiple devices, you're able to connect from different devices at the same time simultaneously. Another little tip about using the video in an online environment. If you have a concern with regard to privacy, in terms of showing your home, in terms of showing the room that you're in, make use of these pretty virtual backgrounds that are freely available on the internet today. I find it quite exciting to look for these new backgrounds on a daily basis and install a different one. Just it gives a different feel to the whole environment. So if you are not comfortable about exposing the background that you're in, install a virtual background before you switch your video on. The other little tip is before you start streaming your video, test it. And you don't test it while you're online live on the meeting, but test it using the settings in Zoom before you log into the meeting itself. So for those of you that don't know how to test it, I'm going to try sharing my screen. And if somebody can please confirm on that end, because I am logged into Zoom already. So I'm not sure if it's going to allow me to share my screen as such, but let's see. Okay, so are you able to see the Zoom screen? Can somebody please
see
confirm?
Slido. Dr. Singh, we can see slido.com at the moment.
Okay, so you can't see the Zoom settings page.
No, we're only seeing the slido.com, the results of the survey.
Okay, that's because I'm logged into Zoom in the current account currently. Okay, so let me just try and find a quick fix, maybe just to do this and to take a screenshot. Please bear with me. Just trying to find a way to show you this.
I think we may be seeing it now. We're seeing virtual background, and then it says choose virtual background.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is precisely what I wanted to show you. Is in your Zoom app, if you're logging in from your laptop, you can actually go to settings and click on virtual background before you log into a meeting. And why it's important for you to do this is because often when we switch our videos on, we don't know where we're going to be positioned. So I'm going to do something that's going to make me look a bit unprofessional now. But for example, your camera could be down like this, which means it's not projecting your face. It's not in the correct position for broadcasting. Okay, so you can set your camera to the actual setting that you want. So how much of your face you want showing, how far back do you want to be from the camera, how close do you want it to be, and you're able to see all of this in an offline mode before connecting. So it's important that you test all of this so that when you come online and you're projecting, you are already projecting a professional image of yourself. If you're not sure, stop your video and adjust yourself accordingly and then reconnect. Okay, it creates a better professional image of yourself when you are online. Many of us, okay, so I'm going to stop that. Thank you for confirming that. We can stop the share and we can go back to our Zoom meeting. Okay, another common mistake that lots of us make when we are presenting, when you start talking and you realize that you are muted, most often Zoom tells you that you are muted. It might take a while for you to find your mouse and get it to the unmute button, but did you know that you can just simply press the space bar and unmute yourself for a period of time? So if you just need to say, for example, yes, no, or something like that, you can simply just press the space bar, give your feedback, and let go of the space bar. So an easy way in which to communicate without facing that embarrassment of being muted while you are presenting. Another tip I find very useful is if you are going to be sharing a PowerPoint presentation, please run your presentation in slideshow mode before you start sharing your screen. Because what often happens, and I'm going to do this the wrong way around to show you, is that most people end up sharing their PowerPoint presentation in that mode. Some presenters forget to run it in slideshow mode, so they simply move from slide to slide in this design mode, which can be very irritating for those of us that know that there is a better way in which to present. But the best way is to run your presentation in slideshow mode and then start your share. So you start your share when you are already in slideshow mode. Okay, we might not get all of this perfect the first time round, but there's ways and there are opportunities for us to improve. The use of the Annotate button in Zoom, I'm not sure how many of us have used this, but the Annotate feature is a very good feature if you want to highlight things as you're going along in your presentation. So for example, there's a spotlight that you can use which serves the same as a laser beam. So this red spotlight that we have can help to draw the attendees' attention to different parts of your presentation. Okay. Okay, so for those of us that make use of meeting rooms rather than webinars, have you ever tried using breakaway rooms? Breakaway rooms are a wonderful way in which to get your attendees brainstorm something, for example. So you might have different teams that work together. So your sales team, your HR team, and so on. And you can set up breakaway rooms where you can allocate people, or you can create breakaway rooms where people are randomly allocated. Get them to discuss, and then they come back. And you can control how long that discussion happens for. So for example, you could have a discussion go on for 10 minutes, and automatically after the 10 minutes, everybody from those breakaway rooms are brought back into the main meeting. And so you are able to control time in that way, so your meetings don't run over because the breakaway is only for that particular time. If you are the manager of all those groups, or if you are the director and you need to see what discussions are going on in those groups, there is an ability for you as the main host to visit those rooms during the discussion itself, giving you that experience of moving from meeting room to meeting room during the session itself. So I find breakaway rooms a very good method of getting engagement and interaction in the online environment. Okay, so it's already 11:38, and perhaps I should stop there because Proproaches also needs to speak. Farah, I have one more slide, which is just the skills that I thought are necessary. Should I go through it, or should I?
Please go through.
Okay. Okay, so the last aspect, I'm sorry, there's a lot more features in Zoom which you can use. We just don't have time to go through each one of them currently. But if you're wanting assistance outside the session, we could try to set up something, or if there's an opportunity to do a more practical session, we could do that at a later stage. Okay, so I just want to round up with the last slide that I had in my presentation. And it's not because I'm wanting to show the frameworks that I've developed, but as I was preparing for this presentation, I realized that the framework that I had created for the academics in terms of the skill set that's required to move to an online environment could literally apply to anybody, except one or two. Except one or two concepts that apply specifically to the education sector. So This is a skill set which I developed from my interaction with academics that I think is the minimum that academics need to have in terms of progressing or having some sort of success in the online environment with their students. And for all of us sitting in this room, I think all of these constructs will apply to us except for digital pedagogy, because that relates to the education sphere itself. But the first skill set that we need to have is digital literacy. That's understanding the tools that we want to use. So knowing how to set up a Zoom meeting, knowing how to set up a Zoom webinar, and I'm just using Zoom as the example. What's the difference between a meeting and a webinar? When would you use a webinar? When would you use a meeting? So understanding the tools that we are using, that's digital literacy. Okay, the question that we had earlier about the employees having a problem with the work-life balance, I think it's very important for us, especially as leaders and as managers, to inculcate and to develop emotional intelligence and empathy. So understanding what your employees might be going through, perhaps trying to look at ways in which you could give them flexibility to complete the tasks that they have in order to balance that work life. Understanding that on a particular day, an employee might be having just a bad day at home. Understanding that they might not have the environment that is conducive for them to participate in a video meeting at that particular point in time. Okay. Communities of practice we've spoken a lot about in terms of the gender digital divide, and I think you understand what we're speaking about there. The concepts that I like to use related to communities of practice is sharing is caring, what we often tell our children, and the other one, which is a sort of word of letsema. Okay, letsema means trying to help each other to achieve a common purpose. The third skill that I think is absolutely essential now that we've moved to the online environment is understanding your digital identity. Knowing the concept of your digital footprint. Whatever you put online becomes a footprint forever. And while we tell this to our children and to our students, we need to remember this ourselves. Okay, so recently I was doing a workshop for the CAA in Zimbabwe, and I explained some of these concepts to their educators. And at the end of the session, both the managers and the director of the institute, in separate feedback, said to me that they look at the digital footprint of employees before they employ them. So they go through Facebook profiles, they go through LinkedIn profiles, they monitor to see what they post on Twitter. And our students don't realize this, especially the youngsters. They say what they want, they do what they want when they're online, but they have to be careful that it doesn't come back to harm them. Okay. Also, in terms of your digital footprint, differentiate between your professional footprint and your social footprint. So LinkedIn versus Facebook. Do you understand the difference? What do you post on LinkedIn? What do you post on Facebook? Who do you befriend on LinkedIn? Who do you befriend on Facebook? Separating those, so creating for yourself a professional profile is really important in the digital world. Recognizing diversity, and this was created for recognizing diversity in our classroom. But I think even amongst your employees, there's diversity. You need to recognize this. How do you address it? How do you foster this diversity in terms of supporting different types of people in the same room? Time management is absolutely essential. So if your online session is meant to be 2 hours, if you go a few minutes over here and there, you start slightly late, it's fine. But don't take a 2-hour meeting into a 4-hour meeting. People are going to zone out completely. You're not going to get any interaction, and most people are going to be online for the sake of showing you that they're physically online. Okay, the communication skills is essential. I think your communication skills in an online environment is even more important than it is in a face-to-face environment. So for example, not to use this in a bad light, but we started slightly late today. So were you panicking on that side as the attendee saying, I don't know if I can't get in, what's wrong? It's gone past 10 o'clock. So we need to keep the communication going between the attendees and yourself. So if you're breaking, for example, I used a slide that said we are on break. And the reason for that is because if I stop talking and I move across and somebody had no connectivity when I said we're taking a break, you'll find frantic messages on the chat. There's no audio. I can't hear you. What's happening? Okay, so keep your audience informed of what's going on at all points in time. And if you can switch your video on, please do so. It helps to keep that human interaction and engagement going. Okay, so Farah, thank you very much for the opportunity. I know I've spoken a lot, so I'm going to leave it at that for today. And I'm happy, I do see a few questions, but maybe Prof. Roaches would like to speak first, and then we can take the Q&As.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. Prof, I think we'll hand over to you to make your comments, and then we can go to any questions overall or comments that are still there.
Okay, thank you very much, Farah, and I'd like to thank Dr. Singh as well for such an informative talk, and you can see it's very well researched, very professional, and I think we're very grateful that she's taken time to share this wealth of knowledge with us. So what I'd like to do is just to bring it a little bit back to the leadership and management context, and also in terms of the organization. So some of us may be leaders and managers. We may not be in a formal position, but we may have influence as well. So I just want to bring back some of the points that Dr. Singh spoke about. She spoke about all of us being digital citizens and how do we basically engage. And if we can talk about this new norm, COVID-19 propelled us to basically engage with technology, whether we like it or not. We were thrust into this environment. And basically, this involves rapid change, and many of us were not prepared, but it was a case of basically sink or swim. And if we're not careful in the organizational context, we may lose people. You could have what she spoke about, the connected and the unconnected. And even in the organization as well, you've got those who are not keeping up with this rapid pace. So I'm not sure how many of us were present for the first session, but if I can just remind us about the definition of leadership again, which is basically this influence relationship between followers and leaders. There's a shared purpose and intention, and ultimately it's about bringing about real change. So I just want to remind us as well that, again, in terms of if we're looking at this context, our discussion on the digital age, having to rapidly embrace technology, we can see that ourselves as leaders and managers, we need to be change managers or change agents. And I would just like to take time as well to briefly say there's a difference here between management and leadership. So management often, it's about maintaining stability, the status quo. There's this culture of efficiency, but we can see that what we need now is the complete opposite. We need people to be embracing change. Us as leaders and managers, how do we help develop their adaptability, their flexibility, and ultimately help people to be open to change? And I think another concept that is important basically is how do we avoid a situation where we derail? So it could be that the needs of the job, the work environment is changing at this rapid pace, but our own skills, qualities, characteristics are not keeping up with this. And I think, again, this is where COVID-19 came in as well, that if we're not engaging change, if we are not keeping up, there could be issues. So again, it talks to those personal characteristics as well, that we need to be open to change. There's got to be this willingness from our side to have this make it happen attitude. We have to have the motivation to stay up to date, the passion to drive our own growth. And Dr. Singh mentioned Zoom, all these amazing platforms that we may not have been aware of. But again, this just speaks to us as followers and leaders as well, that we need to be proactive as well. And we can see that the need for change is there. Technology has pushed it. It's pushed us to be change agents. And ultimately, we need to basically demonstrate courage as leaders, as followers, as managers, We've got to learn, we've got to engage, we've got to be very proactive. And it could involve also not only changing structures or processes, but also our mindset. So are we willing to let go of the old ways of doing things? We engaged in remote working. What does this mean for us? Have we really taken time to process what it means? Are we changing? So again, it's this realization that as leaders and managers, we've got to embrace the change and help our people develop crisis management skills. But as Dr. Singh also spoke, it's about having empathy, having EI, being calm, being focused, and ultimately reassuring them in the face of this extreme uncertainty. And in the first webinar, we spoke about VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So just a reminder as well that as leaders and managers, we can't only focus on the job or the task, we've got to be equally focused on the people. How are they feeling? And I think this also kind of leads us to think about transformational leadership, which we probably heard about, but ultimately it's about basically bringing about significant change with the followers, with the organization, and basically engaging and empowering our followers. So I think open-mindedness is a key concept. And something else as well to keep in mind, we have to understand the interconnectedness of all of this. There are different stakeholders involved. And if we just make changes to one part, you could have a situation where people get left behind and there could be unintended consequences as well. So I think the key here is that it's about embracing change. There were questions about remote working. And yes, you've got staff members, males and females, who are working from home, who've had to rapidly embrace change and technology as well in our own space, away from our colleagues, away from the usual support systems. And we've battled. Some of us have had to engage with homeschooling, housework, be the primary caregiver. Maybe we sleep less. The quality of the sleep is not good anymore. So all of this speaks to the work-life balance. And ultimately, there's this increased burden, anxiety, and stress and fatigue as well. Many people are saying they are exhausted. They don't even know how they're going to get to December. And again, as the managers and the leaders, we have to take this into account. So yes, we've been pushed into a situation where there's unplanned change. It wasn't planned. It just hit us all. But again, it's how we respond to it. And especially as managers and leaders, how do we help our staff develop these capabilities to face this change? We have to be courageous. There has to be courage, and we need to focus on this because it's going to enhance our competitiveness. In change management, they say adapt or die. So if we don't adapt, the competitors are going to be moving forward. So yes, there's this new norm, new structures, processes, but most importantly, mindset. So we can't work in silos. We've got to emphasize the interconnectedness, and there's local solutions. So you're not going to have a situation where a one size fits all. It's very different. Engage at the local level, communicate with staff, ensure that there's early engagement and participation. Team leadership, let's look at our organizational culture, our way of doing things. Are we agile? Are we responsive? Are we sure that we're not leaving anybody behind? So I think in just conclusion, I think in terms of the leadership and management perspective, we've got to be very careful that we are not leaving people behind, and especially that we are all realizing that there's the sense of interconnectedness, and it's more important now than ever, especially if we look at the remote working situation. I would just like to, I hope it works, share a video with you. It's about 3 minutes. Let's see if this works. Otherwise, I'll put it in the link and make it available to you. Father or Dr. Singh, can you just confirm for me?
Yes,
Can
we
you
can.
hear it? Okay.
Just your audio is a bit low.
Okay. Is it better now?
No.
Okay.
There's
I'm just gonna. Okay. I'll just show it for now, and then I'm gonna put it in the link as well in the chat.
audio is fine, thanks.
Change is a big deal in organizations today. It isn't just technology, it isn't just business process, it's all about change. Change is all around us. What I've seen be successful is to really, as an organization, have a change mentality, much like a continuous improvement mentality you might have in a manufacturing or a process-based team.
People are not predisposed to embrace change, especially when you're dealing with sometimes an organization that has pride of ownership of what they've built, their current solution. Oftentimes you are replacing someone's life's work when you're doing these large transformation projects. So the first thing you have to, I believe, is articulate the actual need for change to be embedded in the program from the beginning and not just a single event.
Many of my clients are starting to see change as a competency that they need ongoing. It's part of their leadership tenets, and their leaders are actually measured and they are incented on their ability to help manage change and be the champion for change within their specific parts of the business. In others, we've gone as far as to see centers of excellence around change, where there are change specialists that sponsor change networks 24/7.
Having leaders within the organization understand what change means, how change is going to be used as a program and a model for the particular project that we're doing is very important. And they need to understand their role in that change, which means being a voice, being a change agent within their organization, and understanding what their role is and how they can be successful in their role.
To own the change and migrate that change from a change team to the business, it can't be just focused on the project team itself, but it needs to be part of the DNA and part of the culture of the organization. So I would encourage to have this in place, not just for your projects, but have it be part of your monthly or quarterly aspects of each of your functional organizations. And there's so much change in the world happening, and only those organizations that adopt that and understand it and make it part of their DNA, those are the organizations that are going to be at the top of their field and maintain or gain the market share that they're after.
Thank you. I hope that you were able to benefit from the short video and hopefully just connected with what Dr. Singh covered in terms of the key areas around becoming digital citizens, developing our digital capabilities, and again, just understanding that how do we bridge that divide, and where I've brought it in is from the organizational leadership and management perspective. So I'm aware, as Dr. Singh said, that we shouldn't go too much over time. So let me hand over to Dr. Singh and to Farah. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you. You know, I from a personal perspective, I was listening to you, and I was just, as a facilitator in my consultancy as well, we've had to now take a whole classroom, pretty much like you ladies have had to do, and put that online, using the Zoom, and you end up thinking, am I still effective? Are they still, because I mean, me personally, I enjoy the interaction, the connection, the energy, and I know a lot of learners do also. So it's trying to find that balance between you changing, them having to change, and everybody almost meeting each other halfway. And then the idea that, oops, somebody's falling behind, and how do you then now to try and get those people back, into. So I really, really do, I can personally relate to the change that has to take place. And that's why I say this environment is an ever changing. We are all growing with this environment, and we've got so much to learn as well. Thank you, Prof. And it was so relevant, and it was a brilliant kind of conclusion and round up to the presentations from Dr. Singh. So thank you so much. I also want to just, I hope Mr. Molefe is still online, and ladies, I'm really happy to see that the men have also come on board. So he says, very informative session, keep up the good work. We need more of such sessions in order for us to be always engaged. It is highly appreciated. Your panelists have vast experience and knowledge. So thank you, Mr. Molefe. And I'm sure one of these days we're going to convince you to come on board as well. He's a specialist as well. So Dr. Singh, can we hand it over back to you?
Sorry, I was muted. I did what I told you not to do. I said there's 2 questions in the chat. Can I quickly answer those?
Please do, please do.
Okay, so somebody, okay, all right, the first one was not a question, it's just a comment. It's from Prof. Mayes. Hi, Prof. Thanks for joining. She's joining us all the way from Swaziland, which is now called Eswatini. I had to get myself used to saying Eswatini, not Swaziland. So yes, if you haven't used breakaway rooms, Prof, it's a very good way to get participants to engage, whether it's in a meeting, whether it's in a webinar, whether it's in a classroom situation. You can break them up into a number of breakaway groups. You can give them the same concept to discuss or different concepts. And you find that people engage much better when they're not in the main room with the actual panelist or the person that's supposed to be the so-called person superior to what, discussing, or the specialist in that area. So I find that the breakaway rooms are very useful to get engagement and interaction going. Kasturi is asking about Slido, why I chose to use Slido. Kasturi, it wasn't my first choice. I created a Slido presentation as a backup because I wasn't sure what facilities were going to be available on this webinar session. So I didn't want to not have any engagement or interaction, but I used it as a backup. If I had access to the Zoom setup where I could have set up the polls on Zoom, I would have done it directly on here. However, the other reason that I use Slido is because I use it in my classroom because I find that it gives more engagement and interaction because the polling is live. So the students relate to it better than when they relate to a static poll that's available on Zoom, for example, where you can only choose multiple choice questions, a single answer and multiple answer, where Slido gives you a variety. So as you could see, we had the live discussion tool, which students find more appealing than the chat facility on Zoom. Also, it's anonymous, so they can post when you're asking them to post about a concept. And I'm using students here because this is where I've applied it, but I'm sure it will apply even to the business world. So if you're wanting to get feedback from your employees on a new decision that's been taken in the business, and you want it to be anonymous, you need to look for a way in which you can anonymize the discussion. So Slido is an alternative. It's one of the free tools that I found on the internet, which is why I use it. It's free to a certain extent, so you are restricted to 5 different types of questions that you can use per event, and thereafter you have to pay. So if you're using the free version, you can't use some of the additional features like adding in images and so on. So I had a task which I wanted to do here, where we get the attendees to take a photo of the view from outside their room and just post it on a discussion forum. And I think for the managers and leaders that are here as well, they should also try to bring in these sort of icebreakers into the meeting environment so that you're giving your employees a chance to socialize, which they miss because they don't have that social environment anymore. So another tool that you can use, Kasturi, is Mentimeter. You may have already used it. but Mentimeter is slightly more limited. You can only use 5 questions overall free of charge, and then you have to pay. So it's just because I have a passion for using different types of tools to keep my students engaged in different lecture sessions that I look for the ones that I can use free. So those are the 2 questions. Thanks, Farah, for the opportunity to respond.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Singh. Prof, on those, is there anything else you want to add?
I think if we just, to sort of bring it again back to the organizational context, leadership and management, I think we have to be very intentional about change, embracing change, and especially during this period, COVID-19, it's been disruptive, major disruption. And what made it more complex is the fact that people had to engage in remote working. So obviously it's a little bit easier if we're all in the same building. You've got that proximity to facilitate the change process a little bit easier. And of course, there's this new norm. Some people are starting to return to work. Some may have to work from home indefinitely. So again, as leaders and managers, we've got to basically enable our staff to be able to thrive in this complex environment. And you can see at the heart of the whole conversation about technology and this digital divide. And as Dr. Singh said, it's about the soft skills as well. We have to engage change management at a very conscious, intentional level. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Prof, can I just ask you to elaborate on the link that you provided on your research?
Yes, so if you, hopefully everybody can see it. Myself, Dr. Singh, and we've got other colleagues as well that we've worked with. We've done some short opinion pieces on COVID-19, the emotions, what people have gone through. And we've also brought in the perspective of digital technology, embracing it. And also we brought in some research on females and remote working and work-life balance. And at the moment as well, we're working on some more formal structured research. We should be making some headway in that direction. There should be a questionnaire at some point, and if possible, we'd also love to distribute it to your members for us to complete. Perhaps Dr. Singh wants to elaborate as well.
Dr. Singh?
No, nothing to add there. I think the specialist in the work balance environment is Prof. Roches, so we leave it to her. But I would like to invite your members, the female members, to participate in the survey if it is possible once we have approval to distribute it.
Yes, hopefully we get that approval soon to do that. Ladies, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions or any other comments in the chat. So Dr. Singh and Prof, do you have any closing remarks for us? Dr. Singh, I'll start with you.
Well, my closing remarks is firstly, thank you for this opportunity. It was a good session to interact with your members, and thank you for hosting me and for hosting all of us. I just want to say that we are all in this together. We need to help each other. So empowering each other with what we know and sharing what we have is important. And thank you for the initiative of these sessions.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Prof?
Likewise, also just to say thank you so much to the BMF, to Farah, and everyone behind the scenes as well for making this possible. We're quite grateful, and especially to Dr. Singh just for sharing her expertise. I'm at the university and I've listened to some of her sessions as well, and every time there's just something to learn as well. So I think we're really grateful, and I think she spoke about the communities of practice as well. We're all benefiting, and just to say thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Prof.
Yes, I just want to say to Dr. Singh as well, it's, sometimes we sit in all of these and we have numbers and stuff all thrown at us and you think, oh, information overload. But honestly, today, I didn't feel that it was like that, because it was just so relevant for now. It's just so relevant for now. So I really want to thank you for going into some of the detail as well. And you know, they say numbers never lie. So when we look at those numbers that you presented in the digital divide, and then even into the gender digital divide, it's quite scary for us on the continent especially, you know, and we have to ask ourselves the question, how long will it take us, you know, to actually get to where we need to be, where all of us have the access that we rightfully deserve to have. And thank you so much, Dr. Singh. And I'm actually hoping that we have you back again, because I think this the second part of what you wanted to do is actually so relevant. It's the real practical side of things. And I think you only just tipped the iceberg there. You didn't even. So maybe, Prof, we can twist Dr. Singh's arm to come back and give us, you know, to an extension of the Google Docs and more on the Zoom, because I can see from some of the chats and the comments, the ladies were quite intrigued by some of the things you were speaking about. So Dr. Singh, we will definitely engage a lot further. And also to the ladies and even the gents, please, you know, engage with Dr. Singh on her proposed framework. So, you know, so we can get that going as well. So we've got that open. So Dr. Singh, thank you again from the BMF. Really, it's been such a privilege to host you, and really thank you for sharing all your knowledge, you know, and like we've been saying, like you've said, we're in this together. You know, we need to seriously, actively be serious about sharing the knowledge and the experience that we have. So thank you so much, Dr. Singh. Prof. Hervel, you know, it's for those of us that are still left here, and thank you to those for staying on. Prof. Hervel is our constant in our webinars related specifically to leadership and management and for women. So I really want to thank you for coming in, because it's so important when you come in and you bring that and you round off everything and bring us back to the leadership and the management in everything that we do. So I really find that for you, it's so important for us to have you on where you bring your expertise and you bring us back home to the leadership and the management that we should all be striving for. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for constantly sharing. And ladies, for your support. And I think it again shows how serious you are in developing women. And that for me is very important. So from the BMF, from our ladies and the gents that have attended, a really big thank you to both of you. I also want to say thank you to those that have come on. Some couldn't stay for long, but we've still got quite a number of participants still on. Thank you so much. I really hope, I know for me, this was really helpful in my space personally. And I really hope for all of you that, you know, you walk away from today having learned something. And that's the aim for us, is that you walk away from this having learned something, and that you see your time spent with us as you investing in yourself. So thank you so much. I also want to say thank you to Bongiwe. Bongiwe is our provincial coordinator and administrator, who's my right hand woman. Bongiwe, thank you for your support. Thank you to the tech team at the BMF head office. Thank you guys. We know it's a Saturday. Thank you for being there for us. So I just want to say thank you to everybody. Can I also say to whoever's left on as the participants, please email us if you feel that there are there are topics, there are things that are burning issues that you feel we need to open up, like we've done with the digital divide and today, please do email us. Email Bongiwe, she will pass it on to us. So please, we really open to discussing the things that are really that we're battling with out there as professionals, as women, and just in business in general. You know, we want to unpack those issues that you have. So please do email us at bmfkzn@bmfonline.co.za. Bongiwe will be there to help you. So on that, I want to say again to everybody a heartfelt thanks. And I'm looking forward to the next session. So everybody, we've got sessions coming up before the end of October. So please look out for those. And thank you so much to everybody. Thank you, Dr. Singh.
Thank you, Farah and BM.
Bye-bye.
Thank you to everyone who attended. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Till next time.